Good to see you, Laura.
See you.
Laura is my most fashionable friend. So Laura is a senior research scientist at Google DeepMind, and that's the division that oversees their AI, correct? So I kind of want to start with, I feel that there's a lot of talk now about what AI is, what it isn't, what it can do, what it can't do. And I feel like every time I'm on Instagram or on LinkedIn, there's like some new post about how AI is going to revolutionize the way that my refrigerator works, right? I think it would be really great to hear from you, sort of how you think about its development in the creative process. And I think about in the act of creating, you sort of have the process of creation, and then you have the sort of finished product. And I'm curious within that sort of pipeline from ideation to a finished thing, what role you see AI playing now and what it'll look like in the future.
I don't know how many of you have attempted to write something or to draw a painting, write a poem. One of the biggest parts to create something is really the preparation period and getting through the writer's block or staring at a white page for months and days. And I think one of the and writing is also not very natural to many people, so it could be intimidating, quite difficult. And one of the things that AI actually really transformed for us is that this process of reading, preparation, staring at a blank page for a long time is now very much accelerated. So you can now explore ideas, blueprints of your ideas at scale, tens and thousands if you want, if you have the time. So, and it allows you to expand your ideas beyond anything that we've ever imagined before. So I think it's extremely transformational in the way it guides creativity, fuels creativity, and I think we are we should be prepared to see things we've never seen before that are created by humans and machines and cannot be created by neither of them alone.
So you see it as an additive part to the creative process, right?
Yes.
It's not a detrimental thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very strong fuel for the beginning of the process, at the ideation process, also implementation-wise. People can experiment with different blueprints. But it's a human-in-the-loop process. Ultimately, you can't create anything smart. Maybe you can create something that looks smart, like fluent text, which says nothing. But human creativity is an incredible thing, and getting this kind of push is really amazing.
So when I think about this in terms of music, you could think of music as a language and a compilation of a bunch of different patterns, scales, arpeggios, triads, 12-tone, all sorts of things. So there is already AI music, and as LLMs improve, it's natural to assume that the output for AI music will also improve. So I'm curious if you think that music composed by AI will ever be accepted into the musical canon, right? Will we ever sort of see it with the same reverence as we see a Mozart or a Chopin?
Well, let's leave Mozart aside, but there's no comparison for him. But yeah, I think absolutely. I think without having all the information for all the things that actually push the boundaries in music, all technologies, I believe over time, technology is a big driver for creativity. So we see a lot of electronic music, and every single technology that's been applied to a very traditional area like classical music, if you wish, is always taken with a lot of fear that the human aspect will be taken out, that we're going to be stupider, that we're going to, it's not going to mean anything, it will be shallow and so on. But ultimately, the human creativity really fuels the creation of something that's completely new genres. We now have new genres because there were technologies before that fueled this, not just for creation music, for carrier music, for transmitting music, and so on. So I absolutely think it will be AI music will be part of the canon. I just don't know in how many years.
So
And also imagine the thing is the Rite of Spring. There were riots when it was first staged, and now we can't even imagine the canon without it.
So, important to note, I don't think we're allowed to riot in this apartment unless we make some sort of deposit. Our security deposit does not cover that. But I agree that like there's always been pushback at different levels of technological innovation, right? Like even when wristwatches became ubiquitous, there were protests because they thought that it was going to ruin social interactions. But I think that this is a different type of shift because I think that, what we're talking about is now generative. Right. And so I'm curious how you think about that, because this isn't simply like the invention of streaming music or the invention of written notation, which I think like written notation is actually a pretty landmark thing, because before that, everything was oral tradition. Then all of a sudden you can have polyphony and you can have a sort of codified system, and churches could sing the same hymns in different places. And that changed music, but it was still humans generating all of it. And now I see this as a pretty big shift as the author sort of gets replaced, quote unquote. And I'm curious how you think about that.
Well, some authors really deserve to be replaced. That's for sure. And I think people are a little bit romanticizing most things that we produce are garbage. Most books are probably just throwaway books. Music as well. We create a lot of garbage content, and what goes into the canon is probably less than 1% of what has been created. And to your question before earlier that you feel overwhelmed, it's so exponential, the growth of information right now. It's the 90% of everything that's been created right now has been created in the last 3 years. 90%.
Wow.
So this is beyond, it's like this, exponential. So imagine that 90% of this will be garbage. It will be, nobody will ever know about this. I think the power of AI, this new technology, is that it can do things that human will not be able to do. No human can read 30,000 pages within their lifetime. 30,000 pages of this and 30,000 pages in another area. So no humans can read all the books in the world. So imagine if you're able to read this, what kind of ideas you can come up with.
So I guess this goes into more of like a philosophical question around the purpose of art. Because when I think about, pick your composer, right, who created something, I think of that as an individual who moves through the world with probably a heightened state of sensitivity, who filters not through the entire encyclopedia of all music ever created, but through what they've been exposed to and their own experiences. And they filter their big feelings through their medium in a way that sort of feels right to them. And then we as consumers of this art have a connection to them and hopefully a connection to ourselves. But it's this sort of two-way street of sort of sharing and receiving. And I feel like in some ways, like that's the point.
Yeah.
And so I guess I would question if you could have, and we're going to talk about with Kronos about this later, but I'm curious from your perspective, if we had a machine create it, a part of me would almost wonder, like, what's the point of it?
Well, don't you ask this question for 90% of music created today?
Well, I don't think that the idea of creating art is necessarily for it to be great. I see it more as an opportunity for self-expression and hopefully connection with another.
Yeah, I think you're right. The human experience, the human connection, I think those are the most important thing in appreciating art and also understanding art. When you hear an author or a painter or a composer talking about the process of creating their pieces, it's really fascinating to see how completely surprising things have spurred the inspiration for a piece, or contributed, or experiences, or placing the objects in the context of their own experiences and then transforming into musical language or written language and so on. I don't think we will lose this. I think it actually, things that are created by human, explainable by human, might become even much more elite in a way, because it will be so easy to get machine-generated posters, books, music, and so on. So people will even more search for this connection. All of us here consume music because it's a human connection, because it's live music, even though you can listen to it at any point of time at the day. It is way more memorable when you go to a concert hall or to a place like this, and you have this visceral experience of the music and the people that were around you. I don't think will ever disappear. If not, it might just go even more.
So that's a good transition into the last point I wanted to cover, which is, how do you think this will impact other art forms? Visual art, sculpture, dance, writing.
I mean, I think it has already impacted all the art forms, and the progress in AI really was triggered by images. In 2011, Stanford published this large image dataset, annotated dataset, the largest ever seen at that time. I think maybe 10 million, which now sounds like a really tiny one. And it was all images, and it really fueled the progress in AI at that time. So it was much, much easier to, in a sense, to probably find pattern in pixels than in language. And there was, I think, 2016, there was the project called The Next Rembrandt, which applied machine learning in order to learn the style of Rembrandt and produce a new painting, which, if I am correct, actually there is staged kind of a fake auction event where some people knew it was a 3D generated, others didn't. And the ones that didn't, actually quite a large amount of people were not able to distinguish that this was not a Rembrandt.
They did a similar thing with the Mozart Symphony, actually. They fed all of Mozart's, this was a long time ago, maybe like 10 years ago. They fed all of Mozart's works into some sort of generative model, and they created a new symphony, and they showed it to two groups of professional musicians, and one group knew it was fake Mozart, and the other group, they told, oh my God, we unearthed the symphony that no one has ever heard before. And the second group thought it was incredible. And the first group said, oh, well, we can tell, like, obviously, well, that's not Salieri, clearly.
There is a lot of research articles for many years, not just now, but that are showing people are extremely easy to be fooled and very unreliable to distinguish something that's machine or human generated. And it was very funny in the beginning when we could generate automatically reviews for like Airbnb or other places. There was one where they were trying to understand why people completely flipped, recognized everything that was machine, thought it was human, and the other way around. And they were asking, trying to understand why, and they would consider machines inferior to humans. So everything that had spelling mistakes, they consider it was done by machine.
That's why we got to count votes by hands, people.
Which was exactly the opposite.
So I guess the last thing that I want to touch on is, you have an unusually in-depth perspective on how AI impacts our lives today and sort of the direction in which it's going, more so than most of these people in the room. And I'm curious, for artists for creators if you see any downside in the development. And I don't mean this to sort of like lambast AI, but I'm just curious if you see, if you feel anything is being given up, or if you see it as just progress as progress works. And
Um, it's really very difficult to predict anything. I always try to remind people what we're experiencing right now is literally 3 years old.
Yeah.
We have never seen anything at this level of sophistication that it's so short. I mean, ChatGPT, the first version of ChatGPT came 2021. All the other models came a year later, more or less, that we know right now. So it is 3-4 years of very intense work. So it's very difficult to predict anything. Of course, we'll lose. We have Wikipedia. We lost the ability to remember a lot of things, but nobody can really say that we know less now. When you need it, you can get it, and maybe that's what matters. We can't calculate so well because we have calculators, but who says that we are stupider? So I think the amount of information, as you said, is unprecedented that we have at our fingertips. I think it's amazing. We probably will be overwhelmed for a while. I think this struggle to figure out, is it now human, is it machine, will be for a while until we get used to that it is okay to have things which are generated by machines, and they not necessarily are worse than what most people will be generating. Most people cannot write as well as AI can.
what's true?
It's unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, Lora, thank you very much.